friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. Yesterday I shared my most disappointing reads of 2019. Today I'm here to share my most surprising books of 2019. I think the most shocking and surprising thing about this whole list is most of my surprises came towards the latter half of 2019, and that just made for a really good end of the year. I also had a really good summer though, so anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the books. The first book on this list is Fairest Kingdom by Jen Phillips. This book is on this list because I picked this book on a complete whim. I was browsing the stacks at the book exchange, the place that I go to unhaul my books. I get store credit, I pick up books. So book of the months draw me in. So like when I see that and I saw that on the spine, I was like, oh, what's this about? So I pulled it out. This one was released in August of 2017. So I pulled it out, I read the brief synopsis, and it told me that it was like about a mother and her son being trapped at a zoo. Like they're basically held hostage by these like people that are going through shooting people and animals through the zoo, and they have to like hide out so they're not found. That just really sounded heart pumping, and it absolutely was. Like I was on the edge of my seat the entire time, and it was just really good. It was not on my radar at all. I had not heard anybody talk about it, so yeah, it was really good. I did a full like book review of this. I will try to remember to link it for you if you are interested. But yeah, I wasn't expecting that, and it was absolutely great. Next book on this list is because I do not read a lot of male authors, and I'm talking about a book that I've talked about a lot this year, and that's because it's so good, and that is No Exit by Taylor Adams. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe I heard Gabby at Gabby Reads talk about this, but this is one of the book of the months, so I had to like go back and like add another book from like past boxes to my list. This one released in December of 2018. So it's like a year old now. That's kind of crazy. This is a book I definitely want to go back and reread because I didn't really know too much about it. I definitely knew that it was a thriller, but I don't read a lot of male authors, and man guys, this is probably one of my favorite thrillers of all time. So that's definitely saying something. It was just so good, and I just can't stop gushing about it. But yeah, it's on this list because male authors and me, yeah, I don't read a lot of them. The next book on this list I read during the reading rush this summer, and that is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. I had no idea that I would absolutely fall in love with this memoir about Jeanette Walls and her family and her life as a young child. It kind of does have like bits as her as older, but the parts that really captivated me and drew me in were just like her growing up with her siblings and her relationship with her father. I loved this. I read it for read a book and watch the adaptation. So I watched the movie as well, and I enjoyed that as well. I thought Woody Harrelson did an awesome job of her father, and I like how at the end of the movie it showed pictures, like real photographs from her family and stuff like that. So yeah, this just absolutely captivated me. I've heard good things, but I'm not like a huge memoir reader unless it's someone I really love, and obviously I had no idea about this lady or her family or anything, but it absolutely captivated me, and I highly recommend it. Another surprising book on this list is something that, again, not on my radar, not from an author I've ever read from before, but I was actually searching for books for another readathon, and this one came up in like maybe you would like this book type scenario, and I said, okay, I read the synopsis and I was like, okay, it's cheap enough, like why not, I'll give it a shot. And that is Matchmakers for Beginners by Maddie Dawson. Like I said, I read this over the summer as part of like, I don't even know if I technically read it for a readathon or not. All I know is that from the synopsis, I really assumed that the story would and the plot would follow like a predictable set of circumstances, but it wasn't until like further on that things happened how I thought they would. But basically I love this because it's set in Brooklyn in a brownstone, and not only are like Blix and Marnie and the other people in the brownstone like a huge part of the story, but the brownstone and the neighborhood are as well, and it just made me want to like move to Brooklyn and move into a brownstone and just like live there for my whole life. I don't know, but yeah, this was really surprising. It's a book that I kind of want to reread again because I do think I read it fairly quickly, and it was really good, you guys. I don't remember when exactly this book released, but it's always been on my radar, and I think that I didn't know that it had like podcast elements woven into it. I'm a huge like true crime podcast gal, and Sadie from Courtney Summers was exactly what I needed. After like a string of DNFs, I picked this up and I absolutely loved it. So this radio personality, Wes McRaven, gets a telephone call about this 19-year-old runaway Sadie, and he's trying to track her down. Sadie is in the process of tracking down or trying to find out who killed her sister. She also doesn't know a lot about her father and that part of her past. So you're following Sadie kind of doing her thing, but you're also following a podcast. It very much, like during the podcast episodes in the book, it actually sounds so much like you're listening to a podcast. It's just really cool. So they have different episodes, they have their own little jingle, their intro music and stuff like that, and it's like written in this like interview way, and I just think it makes for a very strong story. So you're following like what Sadie's actually doing, and then this guy investigating her running away and stuff like that, and trying to piece together the puzzle, and it's just so interesting and completely drew me in. And this, like I said, I've heard people talk about it. It was great, it was wonderful. I finally picked it up at the book exchange, and I'm so glad I did. And on my TBR, like I didn't have a physical copy of it for a while, but it was on my like mental TBR for a while, and then I finally did an exchange and got this book, and then it just sat on my TBR forever until Buzzwordathon. And I'm talking about Tell Me Three Things by Julie Buxbaum. And when I posted my TBR for the readathon, my friend Alex told me, he was like, you have to read that, it's like one of my favorites. So I did, and I loved it. It was so intriguing. It was kind of mysterious too, because you never knew who SN was, but you just like wanted it to work out so much, and I read it so fast. It was so good. If you have had this on your TBR for a while and you're thinking about picking it up, I highly recommend you do that. The next one I also read for Buzzwordathon, and that is Mr. Penumbram's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. Another book that I have had on my TBR for a while. First I had it on like my mental TBR, then I finally got a copy, and it was just sitting on my TBR dollhouse shelf, and I finally picked it up thanks to Buzzwordathon, and I'm so glad that I did, because if you like books about books, which I didn't really know that I did, but it's also like a bookstore, it's also like mystery, and just the characters and the plot are just so interesting, and it makes you think. So it's kind of like thought-provoking as well. It's just such an interesting read. I really need to look into the other books. I also read this book in November. It surprised me. I'm not sure why. I just think because like I wasn't expecting like too much from it. I only heard like one or two other people ever talk about it before I read it, and I know that they enjoyed it, probably not as much as I did. And then recently on that vlog where I read this book, someone said that they kind of got bored by it. So I don't think it's everybody's cup of tea, but it really surprised me. Again, I think it's because I picked up this book after a string of DNFs, and it just really captivated me. I'm talking about Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, and this is about our main character, Chloe, who deals with like chronic illness, chronic pain, and she enlists the help of this I don't know what he's considered, kind of like handyman of this flat apartment place that she's living, and they don't like each other, but she enlists his help, and they kind of, you know, start hanging out more. And I just like the list aspect of it, and I liked the romance, and I just shipped these guys together so hard, and I'm glad that there's going to be more coming out in this like world of her family and so forth. But yeah, I really liked that one. Now the last two books on this list are books you haven't even heard me really talk about yet. That's because I read them this month, so I will be talking more about them in my December wrap-up coming soon. The first one is The One by John Mars. I heard about this on Gabby Reed's channel, where I get like most of my recommendations. She read The Passengers and she really liked it, so then she went back and she read this one, and I've heard her talk about both, obviously, but I was really interested in this one more, like as synopsis wise. This is where people are living in a time where you can do a DNA test and they have found the strand that matches you biologically with the person that you're supposed to be with, like the one. And we follow 4 different people, and their storylines are so different and so engaging, and every single chapter is told from, it changes the point of view every single chapter, and every single chapter like kind of leaves you on a little bit of cliffhanger, so you want to get back to their chapter but you're enjoying the other person's chapter just as much. So it's a very fast-paced read. It's very good. It's very well written. It surprises you in ways you wouldn't. The reason why this on this list is it's considered like sci-fi, which, you know, I don't read, but I definitely want to pick up The Passengers now because I really liked this. So, and the last book on this list is actually a collection of poems, and I just recently read this. I think I read this yesterday afternoon or the day before. I have the best luck reading poetry right when I need it, and I absolutely needed this in my life right when I read it. And I was sent this from the poet herself, and I'm talking about The Shades of Missing You by Veronica Togalevi, and I just loved it so much. She reached out to me like quite a while ago and asked if I wanted a free copy of her book, and I believe I initially turned her down, but then I was like, you know what, like, okay, I'll take it. I just don't know when I'll be able to get to it. And it's just been sitting like waiting, and I was doing my book haul and I decided, you know what, I think I'm gonna read it now. And I'm so glad I did. This is probably my new favorite poetry collection ever. It's so hard because poetry is so different, but themes on this are basically explained in the introduction, and I believe I read a portion of that in my book haul. So if you're interested in that, definitely watch my book haul where I talk about this book. But you got, and I'll talk more about it obviously in my wrap up, but it just surprised me because number one, it wasn't on my radar. The poet herself reached out to me. She did personalize it, which I think is great, and sent me a little card, and I'm just so happy that this came into my life when it did. I picked it up when I did, and I loved it as much as I did because I haven't read like too much poetry this year. I think 2018 was like my poetry year, but I definitely want to get back to it in like 2020. So if you have any good collections that are anything like this, like leave a comment down below and let me know your recommendations. But yeah, that's all for today's video. Those were my most surprising reads of 2019. Let me know what your most surprising read of 2019 was down below. Let me know the title, why it was surprising, and all of that good stuff. I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you're having a lovely day or night, and I'll see you guys again in another video very soon. Bye!